Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron, I am so grateful, first of all, to Andrew Herbst, who sent me this recommendation. And this was on Fox News a couple years ago. You know, they do a great job with archaeology. Even if you don't like Fox News, they do really good with archaeology and those matters, especially biblical archaeology. But when I use the term earth-shattering, you know, changing the narrative, I don't use those terms lightly. You know, there's an old saying, this changes everything. It usually doesn't. But I mean, this really does. Because, okay, I went to study biblical Hebrew. And then I realized biblical Hebrew was not biblical Hebrew. You might say, Pastor Waldron, what do you mean by that? What evidently was written by Moses and the others who wrote the Old Testament, Isaiah, was what we term Paleo-Hebrew. So, you know, at Indiana Bible College, we have Bible language classes and all this. But I'm like, we're saying biblical Hebrew, but we're really meaning a Hebrew maybe started by the Masoretes. The traditional view is in the 6th century. I think it was well before the 6th century AD. Leningrad Codex, and which would lead to the Masoretic text and all this. But it's not what was getting written. And so then I began to study. I'm like, okay, what happened? How did all this occur? And so most people would say, okay, yes, Paleo-Hebrew was transformed into a mixture of Paleo-Hebrew and Aramaic by Ezra. And he gave us what now is what we call biblical Hebrew. And there's some truth to that. That's a very long story, a very nuanced story in a very short period of time. But in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know, a lot of, like, what was it, 20% of the Dead Sea Scrolls are in Paleo-Hebrew. And then a lot of times, even ones that are in Consonantal Hebrew are still, like when it got to the name of God, would put the name of God in Paleo-Hebrew. Like they didn't want to change Tetragrammaton and things. The Nomina Sacra of the later New Testament period, which I've been wanting to do a video on the Nomina Sacra, but a lot there, and I want to learn more about it. I've learned some about it, but I want to know more about the nuance, because what I learned, I realized was very superficial, and I want to go deeper by far into it, because Jesus is, what it is, it's abbreviating words that refer to deity. And in so many of the New Testament text, the term Jesus is abbreviated, meaning that the person writing it was referring to Jesus as God. So that's why I want to get into the Nomina Sacra. So then I find this dude on YouTube, which I'm studying Hebrew under, and he was always very nice to show the Paleo-Hebrew equivalent. Then he showed perfectly, and I've done videos on this, and there's other videos, and you can even look this up on Wikipedia, it's all there, that Paleo-Hebrew, the Greek language and the English language are direct derivatives, not of biblical Hebrew, but of Paleo-Hebrew. So from Paleo-Hebrew, you basically have three languages. You have Greek, English, and then Hebrew, which came from Aramaic as well, and then Latin to an extent also. So then I'm like, the Greek came from Paleo-Hebrew, but that's obvious it did. Like, you know, the Aleph. I mean, we even say alphabet. Where do you think we get that from? Aleph, bet. First two letters of the Hebrew language is Aleph and bet. And we say alphabet. And what's the first two letters in the Greek language? You know, Aleph and beta. Aleph and beta. Ooh, hint here. You know, and so, but in Paleo-Hebrew, like the A looks the same. It's just turned. It stands for the ox goad. The B is a two-story house. Bethlehem, house of bread. So obviously, C is a camel's hump. In Hebrew, the C is a gimel. And that's the word for camel to this day. Gimel. Delta is dalet, or delta in Greek, or D as we say it. It's a tent door, tent flap, window, still, that's what they say, dalet. So very obvious. getting back to this book. So I've been fascinated for years. This has been a year-long confluence. And thank again to Andrew Herbst for referring me to this. And so where did we even get a consonantal alphabet? Because, you know, I've loved to study Sumerian, Akkadian. A friend of mine, Brother Treese, studied Sumerian because he realized the different insights it gave to the book of Genesis. And God rest his wonderful soul. What a great man Brother Treese was. And here we have this earth-shattering thing. Hebrew is the language of the proto-consonantal script that Joseph, co-king in Egypt, and his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, were the first one to take the 300 plus signs of the hieroglyphs and turn them into the 22 consonantal letters of Hebrew. And that Joseph is where Hebrew came from. And this is not theological speculation. This is archaeology and the Sinai inscription. Let me just read who Douglas Petrovich is, and then we're going to get into the book and show you some of these things. Douglas Petrovich, PhD, MA, THM, and MDiv, teaches ancient Egypt at Wilfrid Laurier University, Waterloo, Canada. So he teaches ancient Egypt. He formerly was the academic dean and a professor at Novosibirsk Biblical Theological Seminary in Russia, as well as Shepherd's Theological Seminary in the USA, where he taught all levels of biblical Hebrew. He earned a PhD from the University of Toronto with a major in Syrio-Palestinian archaeology, a first minor in ancient Egyptian language, and a second minor in ancient Near Eastern religions. So, this is not some idiot spouting things like me. This is somebody who's got the credentials. This is somebody, he has studied Egyptology. His interests include biblical history, exegesis, Egyptology, ancient Near Eastern history, archaeology, epigraphy, chronology, and iconography. Okay, so for about 150 years, scholars have attempted to identify the language of the first alphabetic script and to translate some of the inscriptions that use it. Until now, their attempts have accomplished little more than identifying most of the pictographic letters and translating a few of the Semitic words. With the publication of the world's oldest alphabet, a new day has dawned. All of the disputed letters have been resolved, while the language has been identified conclusively as Hebrew, allowing for the translation of 16 inscriptions that date from 1842 BC to 1446 BC. All right. It is the author's reading that these inscriptions expressly name three biblical figures. Asenath, you know who Asenath was? That was Joseph's wife, Ahisabak, and Moses greatly illuminate the earliest Israelite history in a way that no other book has achieved apart from the Bible. So this is earth. Now I remember, I'll show you some things in here, Grant Jeffrey going into the Sinai inscriptions and showing how they were proofs, I think it's in the Signature of God, of the crossing of the Red Sea. Now, there have been big events on that maybe they didn't cross in the traditional place. And that's a whole different subject for a different place. So it has a recommendation by Eugene H. Merrill, PhD, Distinguished Professor of Old Testament Studies, Emeritus at Dallas Theological Seminary. And it says this: the breakthrough as to the question of the origins of the alphabet represented in this volume is the fruit of the author's intensive and extensive research and fastidious attention to detail. His acclaimed expertise in epigraphy, paleography, and lexicography, and comparative linguistics and literature has led him to the conviction that all options one can currently advance as to the ultimate origins of the alphabet, the identification of Proto-Hebrew is the very best candidate. So, to say this is earth-shattering would be an understatement. Like this. after the year had changed, the Nile, was twice swollen, and then the cultic shrines and the watering troughs were becoming unclean watering place. I mean, this goes into, there's some good apostolic podcast I was listening to. It's a dude out of Canada, and I can't call his name right now, but he was going into the genesis of Egypt and how the Egyptian gods were calling themselves the I Am, and using very scriptural terms, and relating that to not only Genesis but Moses' confrontation. It was a very good presentation. I wasn't able to listen to all of it. I wish I was. This, again, what can I say? This is earth-shattering information. So people that have said, was Hebrew the original language? Quite possibly. But now we know, or at least we're really pretty sure that, I'll be showing you this, it was the first alphabetic language. It wasn't pictographic, it wasn't cuneiform, which I always called cuneiform until somebody told me it was cuneiform. And boy, I can't recommend this book more highly. And you can look this up on Fox News. Douglas Petrovich, the world's oldest alphabet. He may have another book or two kind of segueing off of this, but great stuff. So again, it appears that Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh gave us the alphabet, including English. And this is why English is such a great receptor language to biblical studies. So God bless. I will talk with you later. Just keep living for Jesus. God's good. Amen.